Hello and welcome to the AVRUM ROSENSWEIG Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the show. My name is indeed AVRUM ROSENSWEIG, and I'm delighted to be here with you. At the top of the show, I usually like to speak just for a few seconds about what I encourage you to take out of the following interview. My guest today is Ruth Messenger. How are you, Ruth?
I'm very well, AVRUM, and delighted to be here.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to tell you about Ruth in a moment. She's a very auspicious character, an important Jewish leader, and I would argue a great leader of our world, the world in which we share. You know, many people are trying to find their way. They're trying to find their zone. It's not easy for everybody. And very often that gift that we have inside, it remains elusive for many years of our life. But activism is actually a way of finding yourself. People say, well, you know what? I don't have time. I don't have strength to help others. But the truth of the matter is, the more you extend yourself, the more you give of yourself, right? Right, Ruth?
That's
the more that you do for yourself. And being involved in activism for many years myself, I found this indeed to be true. My greatest joy, my greatest happiness comes from being able to give of myself to others and watching them grow. Ruth Messenger is a phenomenal person. She's a lifelong New Yorker, born and raised on Manhattan's Upper West Side, and her career has spanned decades of impactful public service and social justice work. Ruth served as Manhattan Borough President from 1990 to 1997, championing progressive policies on affordable housing, education, and urban development. In 1997, she made history as the Democratic nominee for Mayor of New York City, running against Rudy Giuliani. From 1998 to 2016, she led the American Jewish World Service as its president, transforming it into a leading international human rights organization focused on alleviating poverty, hunger, and injustice in over 30 countries around the world. Guided by her Jewish value of chesed, kindness, Ruth has been a tireless advocate for marginalized communities, disaster relief, and sustainable development. Today, she mentors the next generation of activists and speaks on critical issues like gender equality, human rights, and global justice. She's been recognized as one of the 10 most inspiring religious leaders, women religious leaders in the world by Huffington Post. And I want to thank you for being here once again. It's a real honor to have you, Ruth.
Thank you, AVRUM. You're no slouch yourself in terms of what you've done over your lifetime. So
I appreciate you saying that. I guess I'm a bit of a junior slouch, but thank you. I was fascinated by all the research I did about you, and also the interviews I listened to, and of course my knowledge of you when we were working together a few years back. But what I'm finding fascinating nowadays, Ruth, is that you mentioned in a few interviews, you said, you know, I now live with my great grandson and his parents, and you seem to have great nachas in that, right? I have heard from so many people who've done phenomenal things in their lives that their greatest successes are their children, and indeed you have said that. Why would it not be giving out 1,000 grants, you know, around the world? Wouldn't that be your greatest success?
Look, I think maybe for some people that's true. I could list some things I'm very proud of in my political and my social justice life. But there's a special kind of pleasure in having family, enjoying family, and in my case, at least, having family that clearly have absorbed these values. So I have 3 children. I like to joke that I have 3 children. They belong to 4 different synagogues, which is true. Each has their own commitment to social justice, to awareness of what's going on in the world, and they've passed that down. So I have 8 grandchildren, and indeed one of my adult granddaughters and her husband, and now there are 2 children. So the great grandson and a great granddaughter who's about close to a year old, First one's 5.5. The second one is close to a year. They live here. And so I get to see, again, what it's like to raise children in a difficult world, what it's like to share with children the ideas and values that I hold strong and watch them grow and develop. And that gives me great nachas.
What's it like walking your little one there, your great grandson to school?
Well, I think that actually that's an antidote for everyone, because when you walk with a little child, they notice everything.
Yes.
They're not totally, fill up in their own heads. They don't, lots of things are new. And if you just listen to them, they ask really great questions. They literally pick up things on the sidewalk, sometimes that they shouldn't, but they're always asking, like, what's going on? What's happening? Why is it raining? We had, the good news is I have Google to rely on, but last night we had a 10-minute discussion about why is the moon orange tonight? And you have to Google stuff to keep up with them, but it's a constant learning and seeing the world with clear eyes, and I really enjoy that.
So are you good with that? Will you stop when your little one stops, and will you turn to him, and even despite the fact you need to get to school, will you actually concentrate on his question and answer?
Yeah, we try to I try to allow enough time to walk so that we can stop, so that we can pursue what's of interest to him, so that we the 5 blocks that I walk him. He's in a different school, started a different school this year, but until now, the 5 blocks that we were walking to his preschool was past a row of apartment houses, and he got friendly with every doorman.
Did he? I love that.
And so he would stop and do a high five or say hello, and it was much, it's not something that I would do on my own, but it's wonderful to see.
But have you made every effort in your professional life and otherwise to know who cleans up the offices?
Yes. Which
Why?
I think in general people don't do. And that, by the way, that's part of this dealing with him, is that I tell him, he sees by example, but I also tell him whenever it's relevant, I say, just remember to say thank you. So he says thank you to the people in our building, and he gets that that's part of it. And yes, in my professional life, I was always keyed into essentially who's managing the building, who's cleaning the floor, what happens after we go home.
So when you look back, and again, you're 18 years at AJWS, do you know who was cleaning the floor? Do you know his name?
It was her name, and I'm sorry I can't remember it right now.
But you can see her in your head.
Yes, I can see her in my head. It was a wonderful woman who was there every night. And also many of us, because it was the kind of organization it was, many of us worked late. So we were there when she came. Yes. And so we would have a chance to visit with her, ask her about her family, tell her, any leftover food that she should feel free to take. So it was that kind of relationship.
I myself am fascinated by those people who get little to no recognition. Like, for instance, my server at my local deli across the street, she's an Ethiopian woman, Ruth, and she is a lovely human being. And I interviewed her. And the chesed, the kindness that came from inside of her, was as great as the kindness as anybody I ever worked with at Via Hafta, my nonprofit. And I think it's significant what you're saying, highly significant. You talked about listening closely. You mentioned that you had, I believe, written a piece on Shema, which is a Hebrew prayer, probably the definitive liturgical prayer. And it says, "Hear, O Israel, Lord our God, Lord is one." And you spoke about how important it is to listen, how to hear. And that's a fundamental thing within Judaism. Your parents, God bless their souls, were Wilfred and Marjorie Weiler. Was there an aspect of Yiddishkeit that you found in your home? The Shema, the Shabbat candles, shul? Nothing.
No, not fair question, but not really. So, this is all ancient history now.
Yes.
But first of all, each of my parents was from an Ashkenazi household. So they didn't have Yiddish as a background. They were, in each case, different in each case for their families, but I think a pretty strong focus from my father's parents and from my mother's mother on assimilating. was really my mother's father, who was a leader in the early days of the New York Jewish community. And his orientation, for sure, was around many things: the importance of knowledge, the importance of listening and learning, and the importance of Judaism as a faith and a cultural structure.
Well, his name was Edwin Goldwasser, right?
Yes, Israel Edwin Goldwasser.
What was he like as a person?
He was. I could still continue to think he was one of the smartest people in the world. He was just hugely knowledgeable about everything. He seemed to retain all kinds of knowledge, but he was. It's related to your first question in a sense about me and my great grandson. He was fiercely committed to his grandchildren and to teaching us. And in my case, I was first of all the oldest grandchild. That helped, and second of all, he was the only grandchild that lived in New York.
Yes.
So I saw him every week, and I don't think that a week ever went by without his, obviously deliberately, although I didn't quite get that, but using a word and then saying to me, "Do you know what that word means?" And then I would have to say no, and then he would say, "Go look it up." Mm-hmm. So he had an Oxford English dictionary right there, and we would look up the word. And I'm sure I feel like I did that every week of my life as a child. But he was just sort of comfortable with who he was, no extra pretensions. As I say, just to be honest, his wife was more focused on assimilating and acquiring being sure that they were moving up and moving into the right circles. He was very differently grounded in, just to make the contrast to what you were saying, I think grounded in Judaism as a religion built on specific values that basically required giving back.
I know that your mom worked at the Jewish Theological Seminary, so she was a leader in her own right. What was she like as a person? What was your dad like as well?
Well, let me just say one thing. My mom's job at the Jewish Theological Seminary, where she was for half a century, was totally an accident. I mean, again, you just heard how she grew up. So it was a household in which, for sure, knowledge and learning were more important than Judaism. It wasn't that Judaism wasn't important, but there was a hierarchy. She was actually pursuing, which is quite unusual for her time, pursuing a graduate degree in philosophy. Wow. She was studying at the New School. The New School is a sort of unique entity school in New York, but at that point, the New School was, we're talking about the late 1930s. The New School was known in New York as the University in Exile because so many of the teachers there were people who had escaped from the Nazis.
Yes.
And so anyway, she was studying there philosophy, and her plan was to continue in the field of philosophy. She met my dad, and they were getting married, and he was going to go to graduate school. And the understanding was that she would work to help him while he was in graduate school. She got a job teaching philosophy at Queens College in New York. Wow. When the college was really open. The philosophy department was new. And the summer before the job started, she got a call from the head of the department who said to her, "Thank you very much for having taken the job, but we found a man." That's so. And so basically, yeah, it's a little brutal, but it's a true story. And she needed a job, and the seminary job came because I just love this. If you're a feminist, you'll appreciate this story. The then chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary was Louis Finkelstein, mm-hmm. who said of himself the following. He said, I was asked to come and head up an academic institution for rabbis and Jewish educators and scholars. I put together and assembled the brightest people I knew to teach in these fields. And then I discovered that in America, if you're running an institution of higher learning or any large organization, you have to have people who know payroll and people who know personnel and people Correct. Who know community relations. Yes. And he said, none of my professors can do those things well. my board is not giving me very money for those things. And so I am going to hire the daughters of my donors and supporters because they have more trouble getting jobs and they will work for less.
He
And
was a
so
great man. Great man.
my mother was one of 7 women who I believe in total, it would be fair to say, gave 300 years of their lives to shaping the Jewish Theological Seminary. And yes, and pursuant also to what you were asking, the fact that my mother was at the seminary and was speaking on and writing on behalf of the chancellor and doing public relations and co-producing a program that some of your listeners may remember from way back called The Eternal Light. But that meant that she was basically learning more Judaism herself and passing it on to us. So a lot of my knowledge and understanding was strengthened at least by the fact that she was a good teacher and she was learning as she worked, because when you work for the chancellor of the seminary, you end up knowing a lot more that you might not have known otherwise.
Yeah, of course.
And my dad just briefly was a certified public accountant who built his own accounting business and went out of his way to express pleasure in having a smart wife and 2 smart daughters. So he was very much encouraging in his own right.
Were they good parents?
I'm sorry, were they
good parents?
They were very good parents.
You knew they loved you.
There was a lot of love. I think my mother was much more involved in her daughters than in a good way than my dad, but that was pretty common for that time.
Yes, it was. I find it fascinating too that you were the very first bat mitzvah at the Park Avenue Synagogue.
Right?
You remember your bat mitzvah?
I do remember everything about it, and that's very relevant to the stories. We seem to be telling the same story in a lot of different ways here. But my mom, so my parents, I've said this, grew up Jewish, but whatever the stories in each of these 2 households, they felt that they still needed some grounding in what it meant to have a Jewish household. And because my mother worked at JTS, they had some special ways to sort of go about trying to find that and do it. And they followed a rabbi at that point named Milton Steinberg, who would have been who was a great person, but would have been a truly great person, except he died very young.
Yeah.
But he became the rabbi of Park Avenue Synagogue. They joined that synagogue because he was that kind of a charismatic and teaching leader. And they grew in that synagogue as he was growing the synagogue. But the synagogue was only doing bar mitzvahs. Mm-hmm. Again, this is quite typical of the time for your listeners. This is way back, as I tell people when I speak, this is way back around the time of the dinosaurs.
Yes.
And so my mother, I think very smartly, went with another family that had a daughter exactly my age. And to be direct, the other family were, by virtue of status, bigger machers in the synagogue. And the 2 of them together went to the rabbi and said, we need a ceremony for our daughters. And that's why I was one of the first 2 bat mitzvahs, is that the Milton Steinberg, who died before this happened, but who planned it with my mother, yes, there would be a bat mitzvah ceremony. And we were not allowed to read from the Torah, but we learned trope, and we did Haftorah, and we did sermons or drashas. And yes, I remember
What was your parsha?
Vayishlach and Amos.
Do you get up there now and read from the Torah?
I do not. I do everything else in my synagogue. I read, I speak, I teach social justice. I did. I never learned to lane. So I do a fairly high number of aliyot for various things, but I did 2 years ago. I read someplace that there's a minhag that says that since the Torah says that the span of life is 70 years, that when you're 70, you start again. So when you're
Yes.
83, you can have a second B'nai Mitzvah. So I had
Wonderful.
a second bat mitzvah at my current synagogue, which is the Society for the Advancement of Judaism, first Reconstructionist synagogue. And for that occasion, I actually put the cantor through the painful process of listening to my voice, which is not one of my strengths, and I did lane a portion of the Haftorah. And I should
Can you
add
sing
that
for us?
the entire service was laned by children or grandchildren of mine.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Can you sing for us
No,
some of that
definitely
now? No,
not.
not even close. Do you learn Torah?
I occasionally take classes. There's some good people. There are 1,000 good people, but there are in the city. There are some people who, I don't know how to say this, organize classes for people like me who don't have any time, who know each other or whatever. So David Kramer, who's a professor at JTS, teaches, and I've signed up for some of those. It's like one morning a month classes. Bert Fasatsky did it. So I do a little bit of study, yes.
What does he teach?
David at JTS is in charge of the library and something else, but he teaches on different themes in these classes. And I think last year's was on the qualities of kingship, and this year, which starts in 2 days, I'm supposed to know what it's about, but I don't.
Do you have a particular passion within Torah?
Every once in a while, I find a piece of Torah or a story. It's mostly, I guess let me put it differently. So, I know Torah, I've read Torah. I get asked in many places since I started at AJWS. So over the last, whatever that is, 30 years, I would be asked to speak at a particular synagogue on Shabbat or to be a scholar in residence. So I made it my business. This is like sort of, I don't know what this is like. I made it my business not to do speaking, or to put it positively, only to speak in a synagogue on Shabbat. What I was talking about, which might have been AJWS, it might have been immigrants to New York, but whatever it was, to relate it to the Parsha. So to do a mini drash. And to my delight, there are several of the many Torah commentators who have written focused on social justice. So yes. I tend to, if I'm doing a drash, I tend to check some of the rabbinical students who've done drashes for AJWS, which are all online on the AJWS website under the name of the Parsha, and to look at Jonathan Sachs, who I know is somewhat controversial for some people, but whose thinking I really admire. And then Shai Held, who's more recently known and done a great book. But he's got, the book he did has 2 commentaries on each portion, and always they're each like 3-page commentaries. If I read them, I definitely find something to talk about.
Rabbi Sachs was magnificent. Absolutely.
So my favorite, which I cannot remember right now which Parsha it is, I'm sure you know, but it's in Deuteronomy, and it's called Meit Mitzvahs, the way it's referenced. And briefly, yes. The instruction in the Torah is concerning what to do if a dead body is found in the road. And the Correct. Torah says, well, the 2 towns that are the closest need to measure the distance, and whichever one is closest has the responsibility of going through a ritual so that the town won't be hurt by having a dead body. And there's a prescribed ritual with a heifer and various other things. But the rabbinic one rabbinic commentary says that the Torah tells the elders of the town to go out while they're doing this ritual and say, our hands did not do this deed, nor did our eyes see this person. And the commentary that I love says that they said that because if they had seen the person, even if it was a stranger walking through the town or on his way someplace else, it would have been their obligation to reach out, to care for the person, to be sure the person had enough water, to be sure the person wasn't putting their life in danger. And so it's a way of the townspeople announce in the ritual, we really didn't know this was going on, And the flip interpretation of that is if we had known it was going on, then we had a responsibility to do something about it.
Why are you drawn to that?
Because I believe in responsibility. My favorite quote is from Heschel. It says, in a free society where terrible wrongs exist, some are guilty, but all are responsible.
Yeah, in a free site, right. And yeah, you have some great quotes. It's not rebels that make trouble, but trouble that makes rebels. I love that one.
But the Heschel observation, I think, is so pertinent to, my life which has not been in Torah, but in politics. And currently in politics with a small p, not in elected office, but in challenging first the Jewish community and then the interfaith community and then the city of New York to take responsibility for immigrants who have come to our city. And you and I did much the same thing when we were each concerned with people who were without homes.
Yes, correct. Yeah, we work very closely together, mostly internationally, but via Hafta, the organization that I started, and we were both part of a coalition. In fact, we worked locally with the homeless. We started up a school for the homeless and so on, but we also worked internationally, and it was really a fascinating time in my life. And it's as I said, I'm very grateful for your mentorship. I want to ask you about New York City. You said, I'm a New Yorker born and bred. I walk fast, I talk fast, I think fast, and I stand up fast when the best interest of my city is being sold down the river. I've been to New York a number of times, but I can't say I really know the city. Why are New Yorkers so taken by New York?
Oh, I don't know. So that's a great question, and it is a quote from me. But I guess I'm not sure it's fair. I think most people, not everybody, but most people have a real fondness and sort of chauvinist feeling about the place they live. They love it. They don't like to hear people detract it. So I think that's probably more common among people from all kinds of different places. New Yorkers sort of are that way with an extra chip on our shoulders because it is, this huge, big city, this wealthy city, the city with more Jews than any place else in the world. And so on some, that means it's a subject of both admiration from some people outside of it and distancing from other people. Like, what's this crazy city? I can't remember the quote, but John Steinbeck wrote something once that was something like, New York is a horrible city with too much traffic and too much noise and too much dirt. And once you've lived there for a year, you love it. Something like that.
What did he
Just
mean by
that people who are here, people who grow up here, but even people who move here thinking like, oh my God, I have to live in this crazy place. It has its own spirit. It has its own excitement. I, among other things, since what we're talking about is I love the fact that it is the most diverse place in the world, as far as I can imagine. And that's a part of what I talk about all the time now, where people are with people who are not being welcoming to new immigrants. I'm like, with all due respect, you just came here yourself. I mean, your family's been here 1 or 2 or 3 generations, and they're partly successful here. I say to people, your families are partly successful here because you were helped, because your family was helped when they moved here. So could you show that same kindness to other people?
I always get this image in my head when I speak to my family in New York that they're just about to go out to the opera, or they're alpha pitched and they're going to Broadway show, or you wouldn't believe this brand new vegan restaurant on the Upper East Side. Is that you?
No, I mean, I guess I like that part of New York, but I would say that my life is such that I probably don't do quite enough. I probably don't appreciate quite enough the many things that are here and take advantage of them. I do some. I don't do opera. I do or concerts. I do some Broadway and off-Broadway theater. I love the museums in New York. I try to keep track of like why you should go to this museum or that museum because of a particular show. But I would say that I probably am somebody who may talk about it from time to time, but is not saying, "Oh, we're just going here, we're just going there." I'm basically just doing my work.
Do you like getting dressed up?
No, I do it as necessary, and when I was in politics, I had to do a lot of it, but it's not something that I love.
So now you'll wear sweats?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Ruth Messenger in 1997, there was a Democratic, or I'm sorry, there was an election for the mayor of the city. You were almost in a runoff with Reverend Al Sharpton, but you got 40% of the votes because of a recount, and you were running against Giuliani, and you lost, but you received more than 500,000 votes. In an interview that you did when the MC was introducing you, he talked about the election, and he said, "Yes, since you ran for mayor," and you piped up, "And I lost." And I thought, whoa, that must have been quite a loss for you. But I'm really thinking, wow, that is tremendous. I think you were the first woman to run for the
First
mayor of
woman
New
to
York
get the
City.
Democratic nomination, yes.
What are your memories of that time?
Um, I would say that they're mixed. I made the decision. I could have stayed as Manhattan Borough President and waited till the end of Giuliani's term, which would have been 4 years later. But I made the decision that I'm still glad I made, which was to run and challenge him. He was the first completing a first term, because of the many ways in which I thought he was really bad for the city, of the many things that were not getting adequate attention in the city. And also for personal reasons. I'd been in government at that point. I can't do the math right now, but close to 20 years. And I knew that if I waited 4 years, everybody would run for mayor, and I would probably not win, when it would be a wild campaign. But if I ran in 97, when I ran, that there would not be that many candidates, and I would have a chance to be heard and to make the case whether I was successful or not. And I'm glad I made that decision, but it was a tough campaign, partly because Giuliani is just a nasty person, and managed even before his more recent, life with Donald Trump and whatever. But he just was not nice as a person. And I want to say, this is like sort of, it sounds a little bit like sour grapes, but Giuliani was so threatening to people. And it was so clear, Avram, that he was going to win. I mean, I don't doubt that. He was a popular incumbent. There were many people with whom he was not popular, for whom I was running, but he was popular enough that it was likely that he was going to win. And he is, what's the word I want? He punishes people. He's vindictive. Mm-hmm. So there were people that should have supported me, who decided to disappear in the campaign because they, I mean, everybody looks out for themselves or their own organization. They did know that I wasn't going to win, and that he might punish them for supporting me. But it was upsetting to me. So it was an upsetting part of the campaign, that people that I just assumed would be with me in a really strong losing campaign, but they were not there.
Had you won, you would have been the mayor during 9/11. You ever think
Oh
about
yeah,
that?
and I can't imagine, nobody can figure out, what was right or wrong to do then, and it would have been a terrifying prospect for anybody. And the amazingly good news about the city is that we somehow managed to get through it, but I don't think anybody can sort of immediately say, that what they would have done or what they would have done differently. It was a very wild moment in the life of the city, and the good news is, as a city, that we survived it quite well.
Where were you in 9/11?
I was early in the morning. I was at a breakfast meeting, and my former executive assistant called me and said, plane hit the World Trade Center, and like everybody, everybody in New York. The visual what you imagined was, oh, some small two-seater must have missed the height of the building.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what I was imagining. And then I guess immediately she said, no, 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 that's not what I'm talking about. A plane hit the World Trade Center. So that made me think, whatever this is, I better get to work quickly because I have a staff of people. So I left the breakfast. On the way, a woman stopped me in the street who knew me because I was a figure in politics, and told me that a third plane had hit, and it was all it was all too much for anybody to absorb. I went to my office again, thinking like, there's nothing I can do here right away, but I have a staff, and I ought to see if they're okay. And then I will tell you, when I got to my office, which happened to be at 36th Street and 6th Avenue, I looked out the window and realized that, which I had known, of course, but it was a relatively new office, that we were like 2 blocks from the Empire State Building. And so I decided, okay, this is probably the stupidest place to be in New York. So I told everybody we're leaving. And then I imagined, as did many other people, that whatever this was, there would be many, many injuries. And so the healthcare system in Manhattan would be under pressure. And I knew the borough really, really well because this was my earliest days at American Jewish World Service, but I had been borough president for the last 8 years. So I knew exactly where the World Trade Center was. I knew exactly how many hospitals there were moving uptown. So I said to a staff member of mine, well, we're leaving now, but let's go to a relatively close hospital. It's about 20 blocks away, that I know, where I know the people, because people will be being brought into each hospital, first the lower Manhattan, then the mid Manhattan. Anyway, so let's go there to volunteer. So we walked to that hospital, and by the time we got there were lots of people who came in to volunteer with the same notion, like they might be helpful. And of course, the story was, which was because it's hard to understand these different kinds of incidents, but the story, once you got there, you realized quickly that that was the wrong assumption because nobody survived this. So there were no ambulances running to keep moving people up to different hospitals because there were no injured people. There were only dead people. And actually, when I got to this hospital, there were probably 30 or 40 people just from the neighborhood who had come in to volunteer. So the hospital vice president asked me to take charge of the volunteers and see if we could figure out something for them to do. So I did take charge of the volunteers. And the one thing we did, which made us all feel better, is that the uniformed personnel, the police and firefighters who went down to the scene, were being drowned by, I don't know if it's the right word, but were being overwhelmed by the toxic smoke. And so they needed to get out of the ground zero. And what they most wanted, because they wanted to go back there, what they most wanted was a change of clothes. So I actually mobilized these volunteers who had stayed, about 20 people, and I said, I don't care what you do, fan out in the neighborhood and figure out where you can get men's clothing. And it was great. Some people went and rang doorbells. The person who was the smartest went and organized 3 or 4 other people, and they went to every local dry cleaner. Always have uncollected clothing, and we collected all the uncollected clothing in the entire neighborhood, and we had it for the people who were brought in.
I got a suit like that once, by the way. I was going on a fundraiser and I didn't have a suit, but yeah. I want to ask you about the current state of New York City and the upcoming mayoral elections. You recently decided that you were going to endorse Doran Mamadani, and he's an interesting fellow. The areas that, as Jews, many Jews anyways, are not so interested in, is that he is a supporter for the BDS movement, or was. He refused to condemn globalize the Intifada slogan. and a number of other things which are sort of anathema to many Jewish people's feelings and thoughts in this current day where there's a lot of anti-Semitism. You came out and you said, look, I didn't endorse him to be my ambassador to Israel. I get that. I understand what you're saying. But my question to you is, with this whole body of work that he has, when you put it together, can be construed as anti-Israel, perhaps anti-Jewish, maybe even anti-Semitic. Where do you put that, Ruth?
Look, I know him as a candidate for mayor, not as a close friend or a person. I meant what I said. I'm not choosing him to do Middle East or global work. I'm choosing him to address deep divisions in the city and be a creative leader, which the other candidates are definitely not, in putting us on some new paths. In terms of all of those things, I think the strongest thing, from my point of view, is that he's a strong supporter for Palestinian rights, and so am I. And if that leads you to be critical of the government of Israel, then join the crowd. I'm critical of the government of Israel all the time. If I were still in office, there would definitely be sporadic movements against me from parts of the Jewish community for daring to say anything critical about Netanyahu or the country, but it's certainly where I stand. I'm aware of all of the many different opinions and positions in the Jewish community. But I think that is what led him to say there should be ways of punishing Israel for what it's doing. And I don't think that's wrong. So I just think he's like, it's my whole life in this job and in this work has been to keep acknowledging and recognizing different points of view, and work with people who don't think exactly what I do.
Hey, Grandma.
And I think on these issues, my guess is if we were to spend time parsing out these issues, I would understand a little bit better what he stands for and what he said and why, than is the public opinion. Some of it I do already understand better, and I would agree with him on much of it. It happens, and not on everything. But I'm not electing him to say those things. And we've never had it. Every elected official that I've known, especially people in position like mayor, have regularly spurted out their opinions on all kinds of things that were not directly in the life of the city. And sometimes I've agreed with them and been glad they spoke out on those issues. And sometimes I've just been horrified. We don't need that. But this is a candidate for office who, in my mind, has identified the most troubling issue in the city of New York, which is that all of the opinion makers and office holders and leaders
Hi.
don't know a great deal about what life is like for most of the people in the city.
Can I say hi?
You can say hi.
Hi.
Hi,
I have to be
hi,
quiet because
sweetheart.
I have to talk.
No.
So I mean, I think that's the part that's seen by a lot of people here, and certainly not seen by some of the broader press. But we have this little one has friends whose families
Of
are
course I do.
Okay,
I got so
okay.
many.
friends
Good for
whose
you.
families are choosing to leave the city. And that's because the cost of housing and childcare and transportation are huge challenges for the average family.
Why?
So Mamdani has not crossed a
No.
line for you. What
Again,
might that line be?
it depends if he had an interpretation of a critical issue in New York that I disagreed with. If he had said, for example, which is obviously not his politics, but if a candidate said, look, the best solution to poverty in New York is to remove more zoning restrictions so more people can build bigger and better, and then they'll have larger buildings and they'll pay more taxes and we'll have money. That would be a killer for me. That's a fundamental change in New York City policy. It's an area we wrangle about all the time, is like how people use the land.
Grandma, aren't you supposed to be watching tennis?
No, not right now. And I don't, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about what he does or doesn't think about how to sanction Israel for its destruction of other people's human rights. That's an important issue for me. But if he was, I think what I'm trying to say to you is, if he was more right wing on Israel than I am, but he was nevertheless really smart about what next things to do in New York, I'd probably be supporting such a candidate. I'm interested in what they're going to do in this city. Of course, who they are as people, how they got to their points of view, and where they stand. And yes, in this case, I think I'm more comfortable than many Jews are, because I'm very, very concerned about, frankly, what the country, what Israel is doing to deny human rights for other people, since that is antithetical to my Jewish values. So the fact is that all right, Leo, that's enough. The fact is that we agree on some things. I'm sure we don't agree on some others, but for me, the essence of, like, I'm old, Avram, is like Barney Frank, who was a distinguished member of the United States Congress, once said something like, "The only elected official with whom I agree on everything was myself, and that was before I'd served for 2 years."
That's a great line. It's an excellent line. Yeah, I'm sure that there's an awful lot of people calling you who adore you and say, Ruth, I love you, but I don't understand this endorsement. Would that be accurate?
It's not a lot of people. There are some people. I've found myself defending the position at Kiddush and Shul most of the last 5 Saturdays, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I want to talk about your history at American Jewish World Service. You were there from 1998 to 2016, and you did a lot. You took the organization when it was tiny in relative terms. When we talk about Jewish organizations, a $2 million budget, not a lot. And by 2009, you had moved that up to $29 million. And I guess we're talking about an annual campaign. You granted over $300 million to more than 1,000 grassroots organizations across dozens of developing countries, supporting community-driven to address poverty, hunger, and disease. You encourage people to become leaders in terms of what was going on in Darfur, campaign for women and LGBTQ rights. Just on an emotional level, looking back at your legacy, do you pat yourself on the back and go, well done, Ruth?
No, but I love the work, and I don't pat myself on the back because one of the strengths of the organization was that it had amazing staff, tiny when I got there, substantial by the time I left, but it sort of grew people within a culture and within a value system in which everybody was focused on both poverty and the denial of human rights in the world, and trying to develop and advance the message that that was a responsibility for Jews. And so much of the program work of AJWS, figuring out which countries to work in, what strategic plan to have in those countries, which organizations to help at the grassroots level, was done on an ongoing annual basis, on a constant basis, by a really, really smart program staff.
Yes.
And what I was most happy about was that we, in various ways and with credit to a large number of different things, we were able to grow substantially, as you said, the Jewish commitment to do this work. Because the reason we were able to help thousands of organizations is because we went from just under a $3 million organization to a $60 million organization at some points. And we had some special donors who decided to work with us, who increased our budget in some years. But that's because we were doing good work. I took immense pride in the fact that we were able to develop a really large number of supporters and donors in the Jewish community, either people who had been looking for a way to do global work or global human rights work within a Jewish framework, or Jews who were able to think about the fact that, in addition to all of the needs and demands in their own Jewish community, in the Middle East, in the world Jewish community, there were many, many, many crises outside of the community. And we're a community that was told, as you know, to take care of the needs of the stranger.
Yes. There are stories told about astronauts who go into space, and once they get past the stratosphere, they look back and they see a globe without demarcation lines. And usually the comment is, and we are all one. I'm very curious, having worked in probably every continent around the world, maybe not Australia. What is your perception of the world that we all share, all 9 billion of us?
I think it's a fantastic world, and AJWS helps in that regard. I know, and I want anybody I've ever talked to know that wherever you land in the world, there are amazing people at the most local level.
Yes.
Who have a vision for themselves and for their own people or their own community, and are trying to expand the rights and protect the people in their communities, trying to fight poverty, trying to advance the status and protect various marginalized groups. And that's true all over the world, and you don't have to go very far to find it, and you get to learn about all kinds of different constituencies and issues. In my case, you get to sort of, at least I've chosen one framework is to understand how much of the world, going back to the Bible, is framed by a history of fights over land and water. Yes. And so you just learn immense perspectives. You're constantly working with people who, frankly, live in situations that despite what we know in this country, we couldn't imagine. Although right now I feel like some of this is going to happen in my country, and not in your country, but in my country, where we seem, for example, to be undoing a 100-year-old public health system. It's going to lead to the deaths of lots of people. But worldwide, it's just really exciting to see. And then I would add one thing, which you didn't ask, but goes back to my Heschel quote. In the process of learning how much great energy there is from the grassroots up in every country, you also learn about and live in countries, but work in countries and visit in countries where the entire situation just seems intolerable. And one thing that has always been on my mind is that in some of those countries, the problems were caused by Americans.
Yes.
So AJWS does a lot of work in Central America, where basically the canned fruit companies ran U.S. policy in a way that supported the fruit growers and packers and not the workers. And then the worst example of this is Haiti, which is a country in which we regularly and badly intervene, like over and over and over again. And the country is actually in worse shape now probably than almost any time in its history.
Yeah, we brought together our coalition after the earthquake there to work there. Ruth, I know you have to run, so in conclusion, just a couple of quickies here. Are you a funny person?
No.
You're not.
I would like to, that's a great question. I would like to be a funnier person than I am. I have learned in public speaking and in my life to let the line, to say some of the things that will make people laugh.
Okay.
And I like doing that, but I learned some of that from a previous supervisor of mine many years ago, but I don't feel like I do it nearly enough. And it was funny, just you asked, because just within the last month was the press conference where I endorsed Mamadani, and they asked me to write my own remarks. And I started by saying something, which I actually said already on this program, but I started by saying something like, you don't all know me, but I was the borough president of Manhattan shortly after the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And everybody laughed. So people think that this is the greatest endorsement they ever heard because there was a funny line in it.
Do you want to live forever?
No. I want to live and continue to get nachas from my family, even as I keep trying to fight the evils in the world, but I only want to live as long as I have my mental faculties and most of my physical faculties around and available.
Amen. I've been working with AI for a number of months, Ruth, and I ask it to write poems about my guests. So I have an ode to Ruth Messenger. You want to hear it?
I guess I do. I'm not
Yep.
good with AI.
So here we go. Born where Manhattan's heartbeat hums, on the Upper West Side where dreams become. Ruth Messenger rose a beacon bright, carving paths through justice fight. From Boroughs Hall, her voice did soar. 90 to 97, she opened doors. Affordable homes, schools that thrive, urban dreams kept hope alive. In 97, bold and true, she faced the fray, her aim in view. Against Giuliani, she stood tall. A mayor's race, she gave her all. Then to the world her heart did turn. With AJWS, her spirit burned. From 98 to 2016's end, poverty and pain she sought to mend. Tikkun Olam, her guiding star. In 30 lands she traveled far. Hunger eased, injustice fought. Human rights, the change she sought. Disaster's call she answered swift, lifting voices, offering gifts. Sustainable dreams she helped to sow. For marginalized hearts, her love did grow. Now global ambassador, wise and kind, mentoring youth with a visionary mind. Gender equality, justice plea, her words ignite what's yet to be. Ruth, your journey a tapestry grand, woven with courage, a steady hand. From New York streets to the worldwide stage, you've penned a saga for every age.
Wow. So
Yeah,
do I get to get you send me that?
yeah, I will send this to you. Yes, yes. I'm so happy you liked it.
I
Ruth,
love
I want to tell you, honestly, what an incredible honor it's been for me. Thank you. I'm very grateful for your time.
Thank you. I'm really delighted to have done this. I hope my great grandson didn't disrupt too many people, but he's a treasure in my life right now. So
Yeah, I think it showed another side of you, which is very beautiful. Folks, I want to thank you for watching and for listening. Take away from this interview what you like, but remember, activism is where it's at. It'll bring you out, it'll make you feel stronger about yourself. Until we meet again, Zeigazun, thank you so much for joining. And thank you again, Ruth.
thank you.